Good afternoon. I'm James Glisson. I am the chief curator here at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, and I have the great pleasure of introducing Vian Sora. And Vian is here because her exhibition, Outerworlds, has opened this weekend and is on display upstairs in the McCormick Gallery. This exhibition is traveling, which is a big deal and hard to pull off these days, actually. It's hard to travel shows these days. And it's co-organized by the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, the Asia Society Texas, and the Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. And I want to thank Tyler Blackwell, Curator of Contemporary Art at the Speed Museum, who's here in the audience, and Owen Duffy, who cannot be with us, who's the Nancy Allen Director of Exhibitions and Curator at the Asia Society in Texas, which is located in Houston. The presentation here at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art required many energetic hands to realize it, and some very generous people, including the SBMA Women's Board, now the ambassadors, Joan Davidson, Jeannie Denzel, the Great Meadows Foundation, Rachel Kaganoff, Isabel and Paul Wendt, and an anonymous donor. With all that, I want to say a little bit about Vian before we get started. So she is really quick to remind me that her bachelor's degree is in computer science, which we all know is a really hard degree. And she got that in 2000 from Al Mansour University in Baghdad, Iraq, where she was born and grew up and lived until about 2008, 2006. She also has an MBA and earned that when she got to the United States. She is in many public collections. I can't list all of them, but the key ones are the Baltimore Museum of Art, the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Grinnell College Museum of Art, the Speed Art Museum, the Kentucky Museum of Art and Craft, the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, Dar El Cid Museum collection in Kuwait City, the French Embassy in Baghdad, and the Italian Embassy in Baghdad. She's had numerous artist residencies and awards. I can't name them all, but a number from the Great Meadows Foundation, Cita Vitella Ranieri Foundation in Italy and Umbria, the Grundius Foundation in Copenhagen and Turkey. She is self-taught, but she did study under printmaking under Süleyman Tekan at the Istanbul Museum of Graphic Arts during the time she was living in Turkey. She's had many exhibitions internationally. This is, I need to say, is her first American solo museum show, which is a huge thing. And it's here at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, which I'm personally really proud of. I could go on, but I think everybody just wants to hear what you have to say, so I will stop. For those of you who haven't seen the show, here's an inducement to climb the stairs. Okay, so I wanted to start off with this because it's called Citizen. I know a little bit about its context, but the first question people ask me about you is, wait, she was born in Baghdad and she's in Louisville. What's the story? And so this painting, in a way, is part of that long arc. Would you just talk about how you came to be in Louisville?
Well, first, thank you all for being here again, and thank you for having me, and all the thanks that I said earlier. And I just wanted to start by, this is maybe my only self-portrait. I look at this work as a self-portrait, and it was the beginning. It really marks the beginning of the change of the technique that I used, and I started breaking form and creating new compositions through breaking those forms. So this work actually deals with basically the whole idea of migration and assimilating in a new place, and the struggle that was required to get my citizenship and to get my family to America, who are not all of them actually able maybe to stay, or just there's all that struggle that is associated with the path of immigration, especially for Iraqis, and just the physical change that I was dealing with then, and the the terrain change led into this work. So you see all the, you see organs and you see the spiritual aspect, and I was thinking about how the brain change when you change language and landscape, and this is the yellow part. I normally don't really describe every inch of a painting, but this is a painting that I might need to do that with, because I was thinking also of the tissue that connect the body and the skin, and how you change your skin to, it's like changing skin, changing who you are to belong somewhere that not necessarily 100% understand you or accept you, but it's part of the whole conversation.
How did you come to be in Louisville?
It started in London, where I met my husband, Jed, who's in the audience, and he, we lived in all the countries that allowed us to live in until ending up in Louisville in 2009 after moving from Dubai. And, that's where my studio and home for now. And it's a great center, and yeah.
Your sister Dahlia is in the audience. She's also in Louisville. Your parents are in Louisville. There's a cousin from Rancho Cucamonga here too.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like they're all.
Yeah,
It's
just part of the scene.
It's great. So I wanted to. I think we talked about this, but it was so long ago. It has faded into the mists of memory for me, and I was curious what the story was with this, and what the background was for this piece, which is in our collection on view.
This is a work that followed series of works that was created during COVID, and many people dealt with that situation, and I heard the description of war. It's like being in a war zone, which is in some way similar, excluding some challenges where in a war zone you were not able to get deliveries of food like we were in the US. And I was thinking about the idea of, like many of my recent works, they deal with the cycle of life and death, but also the idea of, sadly, that just happened in LA, where when you burn a forest, it comes back stronger. And it's kind of a metaphor for my life and, the subject that I'm interested of. And this painting came back in this way, where it is kind of it reminded me of a forest that came back with a human form. So there is almost like a sculptural form to the right side of the painting, which is to your left, of a woman, and then there is this kind of a crocodile form. But I was also thinking of, iconography from Mesopotamia and how things survived, and just that whole concept of burning a forest will make that forest turn back into coming stronger. And I was thinking of this recently. We were in conversation, me and Suzanne Hudson, about this yesterday, because how the plants are coming in these burnt areas, sadly, in LA, very strong. So it's the same concept, just as an entry.
We've talked about this painting quite a bit. What an ecotone, for those of you who, some of you might know what an ecotone is, but an ecotone is any kind of boundary between two different environments, and that's any kind of environment. So the beach is an ecotone because it's between the land and the sea, or along a river, the edge of the river between the land and the open water. So it needn't be related to water. But you've often, well, I'll let you say more, but that's the idea. It's a point of transition.
Yeah, this painting is actually two paintings, but this painting is part of this show and part of Shahgar Foundation collection, and it's kind of ended up alone there. And it was, the two paintings for me were like War and Peace, and this is War. Okay. And I was thinking, it was the 20th anniversary of one of the invasions of Iraq. And I just remembered, there was a trigger point for me where me and my sister were, it was actually in 1991, where that was the first time for us to see a bombing at that scale. And when I remember going to the roof, and there was like that scene of bombing at night where you're just seeing flashes. And as horrendous and scary it was beautiful. And that part of the painting, which actually this painting Tyler remember, because he made me change it, and I am calling you out here to a better work because he was visiting me, and we just had this whole conversation about green and which side this painting goes. So it ended up that scene. If you think about looking at the sky as a 13-year-old and just seeing that, but for me, I wanted to translate it in the memory of the war as an alive scene, and the boundaries, like you said, like there is a beach in the bottom. So I went kind of exaggerating a scene that came from a point of threat. It was a life-threatening moment into a very alive scene. Because in the end, with all my works, I don't want to portray ugliness. And I've been kind of called out for it. It's like some previous gallerists told me, like, the work is too happy for someone from Iraq, which is a stereotypical thing that I heard many times, and I love to talk about it, so I am going to. So there is a bending figure in the middle. I had a series of works where I thought of myself just bending like this, and it's like not a prayer moment because I'm not religious, but it's a moment to where I'm giving up on everything that is presumed around me. And there is that figure in the middle, and it turned from this bombing scene into a bending figure that is drinking water from a stream, and then the reflection of the stars in the water. Probably I'm over-explaining this because in the end, this is a perfect example of work where I break form and reconstruct the scene in a way that is not expected. So I'm interested in that play of changing scenarios, changing war into peace, which is very relevant today. So this is a perfect example of a work for that.
The red is sort of happens. I assume you're not looking at Landsat satellite images for this. It happens to work. But this gives a really vivid image to show the difference in wetlands in Iraq between the mid-1970s and 2000. So the dark reds are all wetlands, and by 2000, they're almost exclusively missing. So you get a sense of the environmental desperation. This is where it all began. If anybody's noticed dates, I think the earliest work is this work from 2016, and you had a really big breakthrough. And I guess the really important part is you didn't just have a breakthrough, you recognized it as a breakthrough, and you went with it. And it's reflected in everything else that's come after.
So Landscape with a Moth, I started this painting. I was very sick, actually, when I started it, and I was on steroid. And I dealt through my life with a sequence of health issues. And TMI, I had a major hysterectomy in 2015. And I woke up painting differently, basically. I woke up, something happened in my brain because also previous car accidents and surgeries and being exposed to anesthesia a lot. It's like something happened in your brain where unleash something else within whatever field you're working within. With me, I was just done with working with monotones, and my previous works were always compared to Chagall because of the color and the enmesh kind of effect. I woke up from that surgery painting boldly, like I was, you lose organs, you lose your fertility, you lose a lot of things that was a concern, and I was happy, honestly, to lose it. You start feeling better and painting different. And there was this moment where I thought of this moth coming out of the black, and the black area was like, it's like a black hole, and there is a scene that's happening where there are these boulders falling, and that moth is protected on aside from that whole scene. And I just decided to leave it like this. I decided that the background is actually multi-layers of white oils and gray. And that led into me working with the solids. So I went from sculpting the paintings and creating, we don't have an example actually of my older work. It looked completely different. So it was like a breakthrough for me, and I followed it with no fear, and led into the new work.
So this is Abzu. It's on display in the galleries. It's extraordinary. And Vian has been generous enough to share some images that we did not talk about this in advance. I think this is the images you shared are Abzu being painted. And if they're not,
They are.
okay. If they're not, you're still going to get insights into this, but they are. So, I wanted to mention this. One thing, one way into the work, as I understood it, and you can, if you don't agree with this, push back. But you start to work wet on wet, like here. You can see, everyone can see the drawing, the bits of white paint, and then it's really liquid. You must be tired at the end of the day. That's exhausting.
I broke my back after that. I was, but also this was a very visceral moment for me to unleash.
Here it is, upright drawing, and then we'll go back to that one in a minute. But one way in is there's, again, correct me if you don't agree, Vian, but when you start to throw paint in a controlled way, an artist throws paint on a surface, forms start to appear, and this is not a new technique. Leonardo talks about it. It's pareidolia, and I just picked two silly examples, which is the sun looking like a pumpkin, and then this house looking very annoyed about something. But it is real, and I think that's a part. You have a lot of techniques, but one of your techniques is to put paint out there, and forms start to suggest themselves, and then you go back in and make them a little more crisp, or highlight them, or efface them, and you're kind of tapping into your unconscious, and maybe we could call it the unconscious of the paint too. But does that track?
Yes, I'll add to that. So
Please.
I totally agree with this because for me, this concept merged with other concepts in my head where I think of the paintings in the beginning as aerial scenes. The first paint application level. And by the way, I encourage everyone who has time to go back and look at the detail of these paintings, because these panels, you cannot really experience it in an image, not even when you're looking at it. You got to go in and out. And for me, the idea is a parallel to, changing landscape, changing languages, temperature, people, changing comfort zones or changing discomfort zones. So all these kind of experiences associated for me with flying over a terrain. So when you change terrain, we imagine seeing things in the cloud, we imagine seeing things within the terrain that you're traveling through, but also from looking as a bird's eye and getting closer into landing, let's say in an airport, and you start identifying objects, is the first kind of parallel to my process. So I totally agree with you. It's a bit more complicated for me because I do create a scene before I create these scenes. The painting is created in my head. I sketch it, then I disagree with it, and I decide to go completely, sometimes, against what's there. Because many artists say that, is that I am interested in the surprise factor and to follow that. And I used to make things even more complicated, but now I am kind of following the first mark making that happens, then I scrape it, and then I trace it with more color, and that's how the layering started. Did I answer this question?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, and another thing that comes up a lot in our conversations, location and travel is very important to you, and it really affects the work. And I think, although the work is not actually abstract, and we're going to talk about what we mean by that in a minute, without the help of titles, these paintings don't have an obvious geographic or locational tag. They just don't have that. And yet, I know you're acutely sensitive to the environment around you. There was the residency in Berlin, and that's where our painting Dilmun came out of that period. And you've just had this residency in Umbria, and you were kind enough to share this work you were just working on just a few weeks ago, even. But what were you, did you enjoy your time in Umbria, and what were you channeling? Of course you did. That's like, but I mean, talk to me about the process and what you were channeling. And do you don't usually work outside? Kentucky's miserable a lot of the year, so that's
Very much so.
yeah.
I love to work outside. As a matter of fact, when we lived in Baghdad, I worked outside a lot because also it brings a different kind of courage into using certain colors. And there is a sequence of decisions that is, follow that process. And in that case, so that's me. This is how big is this canvas. I should have shared with you an image of the painting on the wall, which I don't think. Oh, I did. So that's the beginning of it. It was like after living 2 weeks in this castle. This is a 1,000-year-old castle, and it's a phenomenal program that hosted some great painters and writers and musicians, and you feel that energy. The part that is blocked is the part of the castle that was damaged 2 years ago in an earthquake. And there was daily earthquakes, but they were on a very low level, so you feel that tremble. And I secretly enjoyed it because it reminded me of that feeling when you were in Baghdad after a bombing, when you survived something, and then there's this whole possibility thing. This painting is not about bombing or Baghdad, but it comes from just being in that environment within that region that witnessed, just reading about it, witnessed so much violence, death, wars. Between each mountain, there had a castle that warred and killed the neighbors next to it. And it reminded me that this is like that kind of conflict among humans will always be present in our lives. But there is the aspect of hope because it became now a residency and it's hosting artists and it's peaceful and there are chefs cooking pasta for us. And it was such a hopeful element. So I brought up, this whole work was brought up into it. So elements of decay, elements of built, the stones, the birds, the scorpions there, and it's still in process. And this is just now, it was like the third week of working on it, but it's with me in my studio in Kentucky right now, and hopefully we'll finish it and send you what is going to become of it. But that was the response to the environment there.
So, you're in a really esteemed lineage of artists working in exile. And here in California, there's a great, at least in the 20th century, you've got Thomas Mann writes Dr. Faustus in Pacific Palisades, which I still can't get over. Bertolt Brecht was living in Hollywood and trying to work in the Hollywood system briefly. Adorno wrote Minima Moralia here and did not like LA very much. Schoenberg was at UCLA from a different cultural background. The wonderful novelists from pre-war Shanghai, Eileen Chang, spent her final years in LA. And then right here in Santa Barbara, Kenneth Sing Yung Pai, who's the preeminent queer Taiwanese novelist, lived in Santa Barbara for many decades. He just went back to Taiwan. So there's a tradition you're part of. And I was just, you're in Louisville, but you're thinking a lot and you're channeling a lot. A place you haven't been in a while, but you lived in a long time. And how does exile channel into the work? And are there moments when you have or you feel connected to your immediate context of Kentucky with its, at least to me, really, really insane, intense green? The green is so powerful there in the warm months. But those are very broad questions, but those two.
Well, thank you for bringing that, because that's a very important aspect of my work, and Thomas Mann specifically, great example. Kentucky was the reason why I moved to the U.S. to begin with, because when I visited the U.S. in 2007 for the first time from Dubai, Dubai was on the path of our migration for many reasons, and I came to New York and I had a horrible experience in the airport. And we were visiting my husband's family in Louisville, and I arrived to Louisville. And remember, when the trauma of Iraq and working with the Associated Press then was very fresh, and the trauma of the loss of family members were fresh, I did not want to be close to it. And arriving to a place in June in Kentucky, that temperature, the heat, but also the green, that giant mushroom color, which a lot of people might not see it as very special who live in the Midwest, but for me, arriving from the desert into a quiet place was very magical after the thing that happened in the airport in New York. And it stayed with me and became a place of physical presence and comfort, but also later somehow it repelled me because of my experiences there. But I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 15 years. It is home too, and it has its great aspects, and I have my career restarted there, and the support I have also could show in the work, but also, of course, I had some negative experiences, and the green is pretty much, it's that kind of presence. It's Kentucky. It's definitely nothing else. And I would be hypocrite if I don't say that my work is not about Iraq, or my work is also an attempt to assimilate and be part of something. It's also the whole aspect of the changing American landscape is within the work, especially in this exhibition. So the green, yes, to answer your question, it's part of that as well, because it's a green that I haven't lived around before.
So I'm from the East, but I've lived out here a long time. And I know people have this experience in the audience too. You fly back during the summer and it's like, wow. Because it's the green, unless it's right after a rain, it's just brown, shades of brown and beige and dry out here.
You don't like the green there?
It takes a minute to get used. It's so intense. It takes me a moment to get used to. So
for me, these intense moments also, even like, I lived by a beach on a residency at some point, and the work that came from that was very simple compared to the work I did from a place of discomfort. And I feel like when you work from a place of discomfort, the result, in my case, because the work is also reactionary, is very powerful too. So just.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the printmaking you did. And, what was it? Were you making etchings? Were you making lithographs? And I mean, there's ways in which your current painting process has some affinities with printmaking, like wiping the plate, masking out certain areas of the plate. And I don't really know. I know you studied printmaking. I know nothing else. So I'm curious if maybe that lodged in the back of your head, and then with Landscape of a Moth, it, exploded, or not.
No, you're absolutely right. In essence, what I'm doing with these large canvases, they are big moments of, the printmaking, but I decided to go big with these works because my first obsession in Iraq was actually calligraphy and graffiti. And both those aspects, because also in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, you cannot do graffiti. They'll cut your arms. And it's a taboo. You cannot go to a public place and do graffiti. So I started doing my graffiti on the paintings. And also, many artists in Iraq they have to know Arabic calligraphy. Those practices kind of came together. I wanted to find something that honored these two practices, and the printmaking became part of it. But the one artist I wanted to work with then was Rafa al-Nasiri. He left Iraq and then he died later in Amman, Jordan. And there was no opportunity to work with a great master until I met Suleiman Techan, and who was doing the Arabic calligraphy, not knowing the language, but he was just imitating it. And offered me that program, and he said, teach me Arabic. And we all became friends with his daughters, who are artists as well. But I started, just there is that influence of Anatolia and, Arabic calligraphy into modernism that got me into that whole, kind of opened a door on the sketch, the etchings and the lithographies and the leather cut ones. So I did all that, and I would love to go back and do it, but it's just, I'm more interested now in the large scale that these canvases and objects allows me, because I'm interested in the smaller works if it's a lithography. I think there is more kind of intimacy to these scenes versus what I create with these kind of works.
Thank you. That's really helpful to me. So this is one of my very favorite paintings of yours. And the reason, at least for me, is that it distills so much about what the work is about in a broad way. And there may be some figurative parts buried in it, but it's as if this is like the meta image, because it is about transformations. It's about the flow of water and pigment across surfaces and how those mirror rivers or rain or the water cycle, or, it's this, to me, it's this very interesting, very profound meditation on just change itself. And actually I had a question wrapped in that, but it completely went out of my head. But did I get it right? Am I more or less there?
No, I love
this
questions.
image.
Oh, thank you. It's kind of losing some details at the scale, but because there are different dichotomies in this work. First, there is silver and gold and bronze, all used for a purpose here together. There is warm blue and there is cold blue. And when I started this painting in the summer of 2023, this painting actually came before Abzu. And the political climate in the world was leading into me thinking about the region I come from. And I was thinking about warm water versus cold water. I was thinking about, which later became Abzu, because also the aquifers and then the salt water with fresh water. So this is why you see these two blues. And it's an absolute, perfect example of typography, because the first scene started as flying over, certain places in the Middle East, but then also being in America, and merging those two scenes together in my brain basically led into this almost like it is a tree figure, there is a wing, or some people see a butterfly, but also for me it's a sculpture of, Naram-Sin, and in that part it's not a butterfly, because I was thinking about ancient kings and queens witnessing what happens to the land. So there is a lot of also kind of, myth and history in that. But I intentionally used warm and cold colors to think about being in two different parts of the world, which led later into my two shows after with David Nolan, and the whole concept of being on different time zones too. I don't know if I answered.
No, that was wonderful. You and I have talked about you went to a Catholic school growing up. I know you had an uncle who liked to go, grandfather that went to Vienna, and a gigantic family library with books in numerous languages. But could you tell me a little bit about the Catholic school experience? I only ask because in the United States, there's a stereotype that it's oppressive, but that wasn't, as I recall, your experience with Catholic school.
So just, my dad was very afraid for me, just growing up, just knowing I was kind of, it's a stereotypical, just like the rebellious kid. I always said what I wanted to say in a time of dictatorship where in Iraqi schools during Saddam Hussein, some of the teachers will listen to the kids, what they speak inside the house about the dictator. It's like the Gestapo, which we later were, our family, my dad was persecuted by Saddam Hussein and tortured. But he's alive and he's in Louisville, Kentucky. So
He's Kurdish.
He's
Your father's
Kurdish.
Kurdish.
So he was always afraid about me going to a normal school where you have to belong to a Ba'ath party. So he said, that child I'm sending to Catholic school, which is later served me in a great way because I had a car accident around the Gulf War, and that the nuns in the school took care of me. They moved all the cohort into this big library where you have every taboo book. Because unlike what many people know or think about Iraq, Christians during that time were protected, and no one messed with the library in the monastery of the school. And I was in charge of that library. And, walking on crutches for 3 years, all I had to do was read these books. And I was exposed to so much literature that not necessarily normal for, any region, any place. I mean, some of these books are banned here in the U.S. now with our new life here. So that school presented a great opportunity of learning and appreciating the difference from, it was kind of a little oasis in the middle of a very intense political climate that was going on in Baghdad at that time. And for me, I have nothing but positive things to say about it, which is the opposite when I came to the U.S. and when people hear about Catholic schools.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Well, as I recall, your father gave you, is this right? Remind me if I'm wrong, but at some point you got a copy of Machiavelli's The Prince, and your father's like, I think you need to read this.
He did.
Yes.
And it did not work.
It didn't.
I was like, this is too devious.
But I wanted to get to, you read a lot. You read a lot of science fiction, and is it the Stringowskis? It was the brothers who write the Russian science fiction that I forgot the name of.
I forgot them too, but I
But,
know who you're talking about.
Tarkovsky did a film based on it. I'm having a moment, but this turns to the title of the show, Outerworld, and it's hard to go back in time on our various conversations, but my recollection is it came out of your interest, these two pieces and the title of the show, came out of your interest in science fiction and near future fiction. And this, what the beauty or the fun of science fiction novels is that game of the world we recognize and know juxtaposed with the world that the artist has created. It's that dialectic and that back and forth that drives science fiction forward and near future fiction forward. So am I remembering that right? At one?
Kind of.
Kind of, okay. And
But
then
you're
also,
good.
these are gorgeous. It's a moment we can say that part of the idea of the title of the show, Outerworld, is not the video game of the same name, just in case anyone's, or maybe it
That was
is.
a video game?
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't, anyway. But this idea of that these works aren't just about some kind of past, they're about some kind of future, some sort of resolution, maybe. But you were...
This is very complicated to talk about this painting because I will confuse everyone here, but I'm just going to try to touch upon where this came from, because when I was in Berlin and some of the paintings like Delamon and Cobra Lily started in Berlin, and I came back and they were shipped to me, and while I was waiting for those two paintings to come back, I started those two paintings. And it was right, again, we were still dealing with COVID. We were beginning to go into public spaces again. And I was just thinking about this dystopian aspect of existence and how much it looked like previous situations me and my family experienced in Iraq. And during that time, I was looking at one of Picasso's catalogs in my studio. And there was this painting of the two boys, I forgot the name of it, the two boys with a pen on a sea, kind of the sea behind them. And I closed that book and I didn't think about it again, but somehow it carried through into this futuristic, because there is a body there of that could be a ball or a head, but it was a body in a state of joy, both these bodies here. And there is like a seal, or it could be a towel on a beach. It was all these elements of joy that I was thinking about, but I couldn't be around. And I started building the scene from almost ink, and I stripped the ink and I applied acrylic, and this is why the traces of black, and I left it there because I was thinking of a scene in the future where there is no longer a suffering or quarantine. And many artists, I was mentioning that yesterday, many artists were painting water again during the time of COVID. Everybody somehow associated comfort with a pool or a bathtub or water. So it's like a return to that. And this scene is kind of serving something like this in the future. But
Yeah, I know what period of Picasso you're talking about, of the beach scenes. A lot of them have Maria Teresa Voltaire and in various states of excess holding beach balls. But they're very bucolic paintings. They're very, very beautiful, very bucolic, absolutely.
that's also his most time of abusing women.
Yes.
Which is also kind of, this is why I don't want, like, a lot of, I love Picasso's work. That doesn't necessarily mean that I love his practices with women and his models, but that's also a response to that I forgot. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. No, he was. So I think with that, we will open it up to just wait. I promised you we'd talk about the current work. One more question.
If
One
we
more
have
question.
time, I will talk forever.
Yeah, no, but I wanted to, this is why I do a slideshow, because then I remember. You've just come off painting a big body of work. You're energetic. There was the Sky from Below show that was at David Nolan Gallery that's just closed a few weeks ago. And this new body of work to me feels like flying and aerial and wings and flapping and freedom. I mean, those are all my associations. Do you want to chat with us a little bit about what you're doing right now or very recently?
So this is a cluster of many things happening, because also this was a trigger, immediate trigger, when I was going back from Dubai, opening my last show there at the Third Line, and Israel and Iran were bombing. There was a bombing kind of path that forced the plane into flying over Iraq, which is not normally a flying path for civilian aircraft. And that was the first time I was flying over Iraq since 2006. And we started from the Gulf and to going north into Kuwait and to going into the picture that you shared earlier over the marshes, which was in many books, in Abraham books, like all the books talk about Eden being in that part of the world, which is now is one of the most polluted areas to Saddam Hussein bombing and all the other wars later. So we flew over Iraq and we flew over our neighborhood in Baghdad, and I managed to snap a video of the first Zaha Hadid tower being built in Baghdad. You could see all these things and through the north, and that was a very, shaking moment for me. And also it was a hopeful moment, and it kind of triggered that whole concept of going back into the aerial scenes and the, bird's eye and the terrains. And I went into a moment where, when I was 4, and I saw the first fighter jet in the Iraqi-Iranian war, and I fell from my bike. And this is why there is a body in a hand, like looking at the sky. But then I turned the whole scene into the moment where I fell in a rose bush, and what I saw as a 4-year-old. And it became a psychedelic moment, and this is why you see this pendulum of movement, there are figures. It became into a joyous moment, and a random moment in the studio that led into this, And it works with your jacket very well.
Yeah, it does. But I think, let's see, this is another recent piece, but there's a joyousness and a lightness, particularly, I'm just really fond of that. I think that's just gorgeous. And do you have anything you want to say about this? And we'll open up for questions.
That is the same one.
I think it's so beautiful.
Thank you. So that painting, I forgot the name of that painting.
You didn't give me titles.
Well, I was in a hurry.
Okay. I don't have the titles.
That painting actually was in my Dubai show that I was referencing. And this painting is called Bini, which is also was in part of the last show in New York. And it was talking about that initial impact moment that happened. And then just flying over that scene reminded me of Bini is the biggest lake that was caused by a meteor in the south of Iraq, around that region. So, yeah, they're both like clashing, it's energy, and also they do have joyous moments, especially that one.
Thank you so much, Vian. She's available for individual questions.